Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm Jon Macri, and we're in the thick of it now. Week 10, 4 teams on a bye. Our lineups are riddled with questionable tags and names filling up our IR graveyard. But as always, we persevere, we thrive under pressure, and we will come away with a win in Week 10, bringing us one step closer to fantasy football promised land. So let's get it. All right, week 10 it is. And if you're tuning into this episode, you're well aware of how important getting wins are at this point in the season as we jockey for position to run the table through the fantasy playoffs. So naturally, I had to bring on one of the brightest minds in IDP to help me break down this week's slate of games to help you come away with a W from footballguys.com. The always insightful, always a pleasure to chat with the great Dynasty Tripp. Tripp, how are you, good sir?
I'm doing great, John. I appreciate the very kind words. It's always great to be on the pod with you talking some football.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a while. We did it in the summer. I guess we did our bounce back candidates. I can't remember if it was June or July. It feels like forever ago at this point. But
it's funny how that happens, isn't it? I mean, you go for like July to November, and it's eight or nine, 10 weeks of football, I guess. We're starting on week 10, and it's like it feels like it was just like easily 6 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a wild ride. Especially once the season starts going, it's exhausting and it's a lot of work to go through, but it flies by relatively quickly when you look back at it. But the days are long in between there. It's a weird thing, but yeah, I'm excited to have you on and talk again. And I'm sure some of our bounce back candidates might come up in this episode. I honestly can't even remember most of the names that we talked about.
I think it was a rough one.
Oh god, I remember. I think I feel like Buda Baker was one. But yeah, I honestly
that sounds good.
Yeah, that would work. But
that was run. That was run.
We did an entire episode on Buda Baker. That was what it was.
Yep.
Yeah, but this will be good. We'll do our usual game by game breakdown. We'll just discuss all the key kind of IDP information to get you good folks ready for the week ahead. And again, if you don't want to listen to the entire thing, I get it. These shows are longer. We got 4 teams on a bye this week, so it should be a little shorter, but we're going to have the timestamps in there for every game in the episode description, so you can bounce around, find the games that you're looking for. And I said it last week. I'm telling you guys, 1.5 times speed. That's the way to go to listen to these podcasts and YouTube videos. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, we'll get into all of the information either way. And again, if there's anything that maybe we don't cover exactly the way you're looking for it, I'll have the IDP fantasy report, IDP rankings linked into the episode description. You can ask questions in the chat as well. And yeah, we'll get right into it, Tripp. And we'll get right into the week 10 slate here, starting with Thursday night football. The Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens face off in an AFC North showdown. Anything you want to touch on first for this IDP matchup?
Well, first of all, I'd be super impressed if people could understand what I say at 1.5 speed, given how fast I talk. But hey, we'll do our best to knock it out for everybody here, get them all the information they need. So I think that this game here on Thursday night could be just as fast as I talk. I'm expecting a high base game, lots of snaps, lots of volume, and that's great news, especially for folks like Jermaine Pratt. We're talking about is Jermaine Pratt going to bounce back from last week? He had a season low snap count with 50 snaps, 82% share. I think that had to do with all of really a strange game. The Bengals were looking like they were going to blow out the Raiders. The Raiders get back into it on a pick 6. I don't know if they were back into it, but the score was closer. It made the game look close. The score look closer than the game was. The Bengals play a ton of 5-man fronts when they know the team is going to run the ball. They completely stoned the Raiders run game. The Raiders pass game is no real threat. And then, late in the game is garbage time. sub packages. And so I really not really worried about Pratt. And I think that for folks that have been using him, that he's a good guy to go back in and rely on. Trey Hendrickson was a stud last week, but he's just piling up numbers. And he's a guy I wrote about early in the year, and he came right off the gates on fire, and it just looks like he's just going to have that great year. And what's really interesting about him to me is that he's 29 years old, and it's so many pass rushers just seem to really hone their technique and get to the point where there's absolute studs at like 29. I mean, Von Miller, if I recall correctly, was a stud at 29. Khalil Mack was a stud at 29. And we always look for these younger guys, not always, but it seems like oftentimes there's a chase for that next big thing, that 23, 24-year-old. And you sometimes lose sight of the fact that these 29-year-olds really can elevate their games and really can be impactful. So I think that's really cool for Cincinnati. On the Ravens side, what's been interesting to me is to see Marcus Williams lose his job. I think that player was big free agent signing a couple of years ago, and not a guy we paid a ton of attention to for IDP. It was 1 year I think he was a stud on big play scoring, but by and large we not really used to. It's fascinating to see the Ravens just kind of take a step back a little bit with their defense relative to what they did last year, but they're still generating some turnovers and making a few plays. And with Justin now Nnamdi Matabuke is not the impact player he was last year, but then again, it was more I think collective team performance than it was individual performance for him anyway. So never a guy that was you're eager to rely on it as a draft as a DT1 in my opinion, but just still disappointing nonetheless. What do you think of these guys?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Nnamdi Madubuike, we talked about him in the offseason, just as a regression candidate, right? Like kind of overperformed as far as his sack numbers go. And I think, people kind of overdrafted him, expecting more of the same there. But the Ravens defense, it's interesting, right? Marcus Williams was benched 2 weeks ago, right? And then Eddie Jackson was benched last week, right? So I don't know what is going to happen this week. I don't know if they're all going to be back. But that did seem to kind of at least like affect Trenton Simpson's role a little bit, at least over the past 2 weeks, because they allowed him to play a full-time role. And I don't know, my theory on it, at least for Trenton Simpson's playing time, and you could tell me if maybe I'm wrong here, kind of off base, but like, I think it has to do with those defensive backs and like Kyle Hamilton specifically, because when they played three safeties on the field with Eddie Jackson, Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton was getting a lot more work in the box, so they didn't need Trenton Simpson as much. But with one of those guys out, Hamilton moves back to the slot a little bit more. They only have the Marcus Williams deep. They've been playing Ardarius Washington out there a little bit, and it's given Hamilton some more work in the box. But I think it's left a bigger hole in the box there when Hamilton isn't able to do it. So it's allowed Trenton Simpson to play more of a full-time role, and he's done that 2 weeks in a row now. So that's definitely something that I want to keep an eye on for this game, to see if it sticks and how it affects, or how those safeties being active or inactive affect Trenton Simpson's role as well. So something I'm really kind of interested in. But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts on that are, if maybe you're seeing something different there.
Well, I think what's fascinating about Hamilton is we've been watching the slot role, whether teams call it the star or overhang or whatever, for a couple of years, and thinking, are we really going to get production out of it, and meaningful production, not just kind of CB eligible production? And we really did with Kyle Hamilton last year. And the fact that they had a couple of safeties, including Geno Stone, play well, made a huge difference. And now this year, with not able to get good safety play, Hamilton having to play a little bit more safety and play, like you mentioned, play deep a little bit more, puts them back more into a conventional looking defense by today's standards, with more of a nickel look and nickel personnel look, rather than well, of course they played a ton of nickel last year with Patrick Queen, I guess, but it just that they were able to play that consistent, the same personnel more often, and and it just the stabilizing effect that it had on their defense to be able to have those same 11 out there. But yes, the pass rushers rotated, but the full-time players played full-time. And this year they seem to not been able to find quite the right mix to really be effective. And so, Simpson is a guy that's he's second-year player, I think, and third-round pick, and I think he's developing pretty nicely. I saw, I think we were talking about in a Slack channel that we were in several weeks ago. Somebody was asking if they should be cutting cutting ties with Trenton Simpson. I was like, no, he's coming on just fine, So I think it's interesting. I'm curious to see, if they find a new balance here, and if maybe Jackson, maybe Jackson and Williams aren't neither the answers. I don't know. Maybe Hamilton plays more full time safety, and they go back to more full time linebacker role. So yeah, it's worth watching for sure.
Yeah, definitely possible. And it seems like, maybe the other option too is that Trenton Simpson's just getting more comfortable in the defense and catching up to speed. And, they feel more comfortable deploying him in that full-time role too. So that'll be a fun one to watch. But the thing I'm probably most excited to watch in this game, just quickly going back to the Bengals, is their safeties as well. We saw the kind of shift last week between Von Bell and Jordan Battle. They had been kind of like Battle had been slowly kind of working into Von Bell's snaps, taking a drive here and there. But last week, they alternated drives. Every other drive, it was Bell, then it was Battle, and they just did that throughout the entire game. So they ended up basically splitting the snaps close to 50-50. And I'll be curious to see now with kind of Battle ascending and Bell in the opposite trajectory, if we see an even increase for Jordan Battle this week. But either way, I'm not starting either one of them, but it's definitely something that I want to keep an eye on here. Aside from, of course, Trey Quattro Hendrickson after that 4-sack performance, if he can do it again. But tougher matchup this week against the Ravens offensive line and a very elusive Lamar Jackson. So not sure if he'll get the 4 sacks again. I highly doubt it, but still a very solid option nonetheless.
Yeah, I think Jackson's taken second fewest sacks in the league based on close to it anyway of all starting quarterbacks.
Yeah, he's so good. All right, well, we'll go into the Sunday slate here, but first, I want to give a shout out to our friends at DraftKings. The best part of football season, checking out the post-game stats, which wideouts scored more than 2 touchdowns, which linebackers delivered more than double-digit tackles. I think you could pick who will do what before kickoff, then play Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, select between 2 and 6 players, and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. It's that simple. And for all first-time Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers play $5 on your first pick set, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to play $5 on your first pick set. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. All right, let's go to the New York Giants at the Carolina Panthers now. Start with the Giants really quickly because there's not like a ton here, but like Dexter Lawrence, obviously we're starting him. I got him as DT1 almost every week at this point. He's just been so good. But we also get a potential Brian Burns revenge game here against his former team in Carolina. Brian Burns been really solid. Obviously he's performed well for IDP purposes. He hasn't really played any different than he has last year. He's just getting a little bit more production out of it. But he's going to face potentially Brady Christensen, who was playing center for Carolina, but he got moved to left tackle due to Ike Ekwonu suffering an injury. Not sure if Ekwonu will play this week. I think he's questionable right now, but that was the case last week where Brady Christensen moved from center to left tackle. You don't often see that. So could be potential there for Brian Burns going up against Bryce Young as well, who's taken more sacks than what like Andy Dalton would provide back there. So I don't mind Brian Burns. And then Azeez Ojulari as well. I think he's kind of outperformed his pass rush metrics. It points to regression a little bit for him, even with Bryce Young back there. I think he's going to see a lot of Taylor Moton, the right tackle, who owns an 80.2 pass blocking grade that ranks 16th on the season. So Ojulari is like edge 29-ish for me. Brian Burns edge 14. But yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup nonetheless because Bryce Young will take a little bit more sacks, but the Panthers' offensive line has been pretty solid. So how are you feeling about this Giants defensive line, Tripp?
It's Dexter Lawrence has just really been something this year. It's just we used to talk about Aaron Donald being head and
Yep.
shoulders better than everybody else for years. I think Dexter Lawrence is pretty close to that. Not Aaron Donald level, but being literally easily the best defensive tackle in football. And the burst that he's able to show off the line of scrimmage at the nose tackle position and to attack quarterbacks is really something. And I think that's been a big part of the difference with Brian Burns. Brian Burns played alongside Derek Brown last year. He was a really good run defender, not that dynamic pass rusher. And so with Dexter Lawrence able to just wreak havoc in the middle of the line, I think Brian Burns has benefited. And he's always been a good player. So yeah, I think this is a great week to fire both guys up, needless to say, on the D line.
Nice. Yeah, love it. And then the rest of the Giants, I have Tyler Nubin, safety 22. He is playing a little bit more in the box. Not the best matchup for safeties. Carolina giving up the 27th most tackles to the position. And then Bobby Okereke, we've talked about him kind of being a little bit more matchup dependent just because of his tackle efficiency, but have him as LB 29 this week. Carolina's not a great matchup either for linebackers. I think they are giving up the 28th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So just a little bit more wary of Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden as well. That fluctuating snap share a little bit, something to be concerned about. He was 61% the week before last and 81% last week. So that'll go up and down. Not really an option in most formats. It's mostly Okereke, but don't love the matchup this week.
No, but the only upside you can look at is it could be competitive enough to the fact where, the Panthers are able to control the football a little bit, whereas then there have been some games where they can't even stay on the field at all as an offense. So Okereke has been, he got such a slow start off the year, and last couple of games though, he's had 14 and 9 in total tackles. So, if he's a guy that's, there's a couple of guys that buy this week. I mean, if you drafted him as LB1, you can't really sit him. You got to keep playing him, I think.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And he's 100% snap player, which a lot of the times that's what we're looking for more than anything, right? So you can't really complain about that too much and just hope that those big games come as well. And then on the Carolina side of things, both linebackers also kind of pretty inefficient. They were near full-time roles. Last week, they were both around like a 7 to 8% tackle efficiency, which obviously really poor. The norm being around 13%. But they're both playing enough to be useful IDPs. They just kind of need to do something more with those snaps. Not sure if they can. We'll see. It's kind of an average tackle matchup this week. Not too different than what they saw last week against the Saints. So Josie Jewell in that LB3 range for me. Trevin Wallace more LB4 type. But the safeties I think are really interesting because a lot of people have been interested in Damani Richardson, the Carolina safety there, who's been really productive since taking over for the injured Nick Scott in Carolina secondary. Damani Richardson has 23 total tackles over the past 2 games. That's the second most at the position over that small span. He spent 57% of his defensive snaps lined up deep in those 2 games, which is probably a bit more than what IDP managers would like, for at least for projecting consistency, which is kind of the primary concern for this week, at least going up against the Giants, who rank below average in tackles per game to the safety position. So it could bring Richardson back down to earth this week, like after his hot start. But that being said, he's another one of those guys that's playing a full-time role. And maybe even given the inefficiencies of the linebackers in front of him these past 2 weeks, there's still some kind of IDP value there in starting him as like a fringe safety 2 this week, I think.
The only thing I would say about Richardson, he's got 10 targets as tracked by Pro Football Reference. So, it's in a couple of weeks here. That's pretty high volume. And he strikes me as a young type of player that you would go after, especially if he's playing single high back there. So he'll either level off or he'll get benched. And so he's not a guy that probably chasing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's go to the Buffalo Bills and the Indianapolis Colts next. Tripp, anywhere that you'd like to start with this game?
I guess we ought to start with the Bills, and the Bills are interesting in that they've had a kind of a role reversal with respect to productivity on the IDP side. You've got Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams, and Terrell Bernard was just on fire last year, and especially if you're in big play scoring leagues, he's a solid LB1. And this year it's been more Dorian Williams, even not playing a full time role,
Mhm.
able to collect more tackles. And so, and the Bills defense has always been kind of funny that way, right? I mean, Tremaine Edmonds was there for so many years, and such a disappointment from an IDP standpoint for so long. And the Colts are interesting too, in that in past years they've been very productive matchup for linebackers because Jonathan Taylor's been effective running the
Mhm.
football. And this year they're not pushing the ball into that, not pushing tackle opportunities into that middle of the field right now, which I
Mhm.
really find puzzling. So I'd certainly been nervous about all Bills just from what I saw of the Colts offense last week with Joe Flacco. Just, people sold, I guess, probably Jim Irsay said, well, that's the solution. We'll move the football. We'll score points. Well, and the thing is when, a defense prepares for a really highly mobile quarterback and then suddenly faces a guy that can throw a little bit, well, it's a different ballgame.
Right.
When you're preparing for 39-year-old Joe Flacco, it's not that hard to prepare for. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how long it lasts, but yeah, it seems like, I mean, Flacco's going to start again this week, and yeah, the
mhm.
Colts, like you said, they're 32nd in tackles per game to the linebacker position, so dead last there. It's not the best matchup at all for Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams. Dorian Williams really, like you said, been one of the more efficient tacklers in the league. I got him at 18.9% tackle rate for the season, which is really high. And yeah, I mean, we could start them and kind of hope for the best kind of thing, but I could probably in that kind of LB 2 to 3 range. Nothing, not expecting too much from them. But I do like Greg Rousseau still this week. He's been excellent all season. It's not an easy matchup for him either. He's going up against Braden Smith, though it's slightly better than facing Bernard Raymond on the other side, who's a top 10 pass blocker at left tackle. But also, Joe Flacco has shown that he's no Anthony Richardson when it comes to avoiding sacks, right? He's not nearly as elusive. So Gregory Rousseau, he's edge 7 in pass rush grade this year, 85.3, played 74% of snaps last week. So Rousseau, I got as a top 12, edge 12. So he's right on the fringe there of top 12 at his position this week. And just continue to like him all season long. He's just been very, very good. Other than that, I mean, Teron Johnson, I lowered him as well. Again, it's not a great matchup for cornerbacks, but Teron Johnson's just been solid. I continue to start him. I got him as CB16 this week, so continue to like him a fair bit. But again, just tempered expectations for the tackling IDPs in this game because of that the way that offense has performed so far.
Mm-hmm.
How about on the Indianapolis Colts side of things, Tripp? There's not like a ton for me here, but anybody stand out for you in particular that's kind of worth going into?
Oh, the issue here is that the Bills just don't fuel safeties with a lot of points and tackles, and they got Nick
Right.
Cross, who everybody's relying on at this point, and understandably so. I don't know how you sit Nick Cross at this point. He's just been so productive. So,
Yeah.
but you've got all these guys out there that for the Colts that you've been relying on tackles for so long because of the high volume, and I guess you got to stick with them. You got to figure the Bills can move the football and get some out tackle opportunities going for them. On the pass rush side, I just keep hoping Kwity Paye will pick it up, but
I
I would
know.
bet on in this game against Josh Allen, who's taking like 1.17 sacks a game or something like that.
Yeah, Josh Allen, he's another one that's just been excellent at avoiding those sacks, and that Bills offensive line too has done an excellent job protecting him. So there's no, I mean, outside of DeForest Buckner, really, there's not really any stars on this Colts defensive line that I have to put into a lineup this week. I would start Buckner for sure. Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, we're starting them. I know Franklin didn't practice today; it's Wednesday, but I'll wait a day before panicking there. It could just be a
Oh,
rest day, and Wednesdays, aren't overly important for the injury report anyways. But I'm with you. Yeah, Nick Cross, like it's just, for me, like that box safety role is what kind of makes him a little bit more matchup proof. So I still tend to start him even in these poor matchups, and he's been pretty solid coming through most weeks, even in the lower output matchups. So yeah, there's just, I mean, the Colts, not a lot to go too in depth here. I mean, unless we, Want to cover the musical stylings of whatever that guy is, that Seth DeFlo, that puts out the "This Is Our Colts" song. Have you seen? Have you seen
No,
this?
it's
It's Josh's favorite musical artist. I'll have to send you
yeah, I have to check that
link
out.
or something. Yeah, Josh loves them.
Not spending enough time on social media, apparently, darn it.
No, trust me, yeah, it's not worth your time. um, All right, let's go to Atlanta and New Orleans next. So it seems like Troy Anderson will be back this week for the Atlanta Falcons linebackers. He hasn't played since week 4. He did have the full practice late last week. It looks like he's going to be full practice again here. Now, the thing is, the Falcons have been using Nate Landman in a pretty much near full-time role up until I think it was week 8. They gave JV Bertrand a little bit more work in there and got him to cut into Landman's snap share a bit. But then Bertrand was inactive last week, so Landman went back to a full-time role. I am pretty sure that with Troy Anderson back in the lineup, we're going to see more of a split between those two linebackers again, like we were seeing in the beginning of the season. So definitely concerned about Nate Landman's production, Troy Anderson's production as well. He's another guy that's been like really efficient, but if it's going to be around that 50% snap range, these guys splitting snaps, however they end up breaking them down, I don't really have interest in either one of them. But yeah, how are you feeling about the Falcons linebackers, other than Caden Ellis, obviously, who's been excellent?
Well, Caden Ellis finally kind of had the game I've been looking for all year. He hasn't been the most wonderful producer as an IDP.
Sure.
Has underperformed my expectations. Finally saw some more out of him. So I'm hoping that means he's getting more comfortable in the defense and obviously learning a new scheme. And he'd been with basically the same defensive coordinator for his whole career despite playing with two teams. They had the same defensive coach anyway. So I'm encouraged about that. Saints are a decent matchup for tackles, and it's a revenge game for Ellis. So let's see if he doesn't get to the quarterback too.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's a good call. I forgot about that revenge game too. And then the rest of the Falcons here. I mean, I got Sweet D Alford. I had him high. I could think he might end up. I don't think I changed it in the article, but I did move him down to CB20 this week. The Saints don't play much 11 personnel at all. I think they're like 30th in the league in that regard. So D Alford is their nickel corner. So he does come off the field a little bit more when they're not in 11 or when the offense is not in 11. So that could cut into his snaps quite a bit. But he's another guy that's been really productive. I like him quite a bit. And Saints are giving up a decent amount of tackles per game to the cornerback position, but it might be more of an AJ Terrell week this week if that offense continues to be the way they've been. Anything else for Atlanta for you that stands out? Because I don't have a lot of interesting names here. I mean, Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons have been solid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I noticed is what's going on with the pass rushers, right? Is somebody going to step it up? I'm not encouraged, but I did notice that Evaketi picked up a sack last week, and you got a team here that's in a bit of disarray. I mean, Carr isn't taking a lot of sacks, but then again, with the disarray the Saints are in right now, anytime you fire a coach, you worry about how the team responds. And when a team responds poorly, they tend to play poorly. They tend to give up turnovers, and so that's kind of the only thing that's, I guess, is interesting to me about it.
Yeah, no, it's true, right? Because even Matthew Judon, he just hasn't looked the same since coming back from that injury, and then obviously playing here in Atlanta. And it's a good matchup because the Saints offensive line has been really, really poor. But like you said, Derek Carr doing a decent job kind of avoiding sacks. So I still don't love Matthew Judon or any of these pass rushers, really. I mean, Grady Jarrett's solid for DT required leagues, right? But there's not a lot here to kind of try to dig into finding value. So maybe one day they'll get a star pass rusher that we could trust on a weekly basis. And then on the New Orleans Saints side of things, again, there's not a ton here either, but Pete Werner has been playing close to a full-time role since returning from his injury over the past 2 games. He led the team in tackles in both games. On the season, he's still a below average tackler as far as tackle rate goes, playing in that man-heavy defense of the Saints, but he's kind of overperformed here in the past 2 weeks, which has been nice to see. We'll see if it continues. It's not a great matchup either. Falcons giving up 29th most tackles to the linebacker position. So tempering expectations for Werner a little bit after his 2 strong game, expecting him to come down to earth a little bit. And then the only other piece that I at least wanted to talk about was Alontae Taylor, their cornerback there. He's CB1 on the year in IDP scoring. He was playing both in the slot and outside since Paulson Adebo got injured. He's still playing 100% of snaps, but he gave up that slot role to Ugo Amadi last game. I don't know if that'll hold. Amadi, for his career has been not good, is a way of putting it, I guess. But he missed time with injury. They seem to want to get him out there for whatever reason. Marshawn Lattimore is now gone as well, right? So they're going to have to get these guys on the field. I don't know what the role is going to look like for Alontae Taylor. Atlanta is giving up the 6th most tackles per game to cornerbacks. They also spend more time in 11 personnel than any other team in the league. So, if that holds, like that usage from last week, Amadi should get a lot of snaps if he continues to be the slot guy. But I'm hoping Alontae Taylor gets a little bit more work there, and they don't just keep him on the outside. Otherwise, that'll probably be a downgrade to his IDP value as well.
Yeah. Well, Taylor's interesting that he was drafted. He was an outside guy coming into the league and really struggled to adjust to the slot last year, and obviously played quite a bit better this year. But then you got Kool-Aid McKinstry out there too, and with the Debo out, it makes sense to roll with Taylor and McKinstry on the outside, and it does leave open that slot position. So I guess you got to worry about that a little bit. But then again, like you said, with Atlanta giving up so many points to cornerbacks, I think I'd be content to roll with Taylor. I think my thing to watch there is I think Joe Woods is still there, right? So I think he's taking over the defense now from Dennis Allen, who's fired. And Joe Woods had a track record for playing very conservatively in Cleveland, to the point that Browns fans were really frustrated with him. And with as aggressive and unsuccessful as the Saints defense has been here, I do wonder if Woods calls a more conservative game plan this week and plays it a little bit more conservative. A lot of 11 personnel from the Falcons. Does that mean more zone from the Saints defense? And if so, what does that mean for the tacklers? I mean, Demario Davis has always, since he got to New Orleans, practically been an inefficient tackler. But Werner has been more efficient. I think partly because the last 2 weeks he's had more of that downhill role and played two teams that really aren't threatening anybody very much with their pass game. I think that's made him more comfortable. All that being said, I think that Werner, he has that longer term contract. I think they want him to be the answer going forward. Yep. So got to expect him to play full time again. And I think that he may be set up for a decent week, despite what some of the tables and statistics show.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, right? Because we could see a little bit of a shift in that defense if that happens, right? So, would be really interested in kind of watching that and seeing how it shakes out this week here for the Saints. But let's go to Denver and Kansas City now. Anyone that you want to start with on these two teams?
Well, Denver's they just signed Jonathan Cooper to a long-term deal, right? And that was pretty interesting news. There's a guy, the 7th-round pick out of Ohio State, and it really took a long time to develop, but understandably so, with his role coming along very one step at a time, which I admire. I think that's neat. It's really not big news for IDP, and I don't think I would want to start him against the Chiefs. It's Patrick Mahomes not take a lot of sacks, so that's not super exciting. But we have Quan Alexander is now in Denver, and I was looking back at Quan Alexander from, is he a guy that anybody would want to start? He hasn't been a guy that we've wanted to start since 2017. He's been in the league for 10 years. It's hard to believe he's only 30 years old. He just turned 30 like a couple of months ago. It's like no, don't. I think people get sucked in that name value. Let's get him up off the waiver wire. No, don't torture yourself.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. He took over that kind of LB2 role last week from Justin Sternad, which is too bad because Sternad, I thought had been playing fairly well, like just looking at his grades for the year, but he was ranking among the highest graded linebackers in the league. But again, it just kind of shows you, how much coaches value like experience over anything, especially veteran experience like Quan Alexander. To his credit, he played well last week, but 50-ish% of snaps, whatever it was, that's not really going to cut it for IDP, and like you said, Quan Alexander, just he hasn't been a useful IDP for a very long time. So to me, it's just Cody Barton that we need to pay attention to right now for our starting lineups in Week 10. Chiefs are giving up the most tackles per game to the linebacker position, so Cody Barton in a nice matchup to kind of deliver here. And then other than that, like you said, the D line does have a tough matchup this week. Nick Bonito, he had his 6-game sack streak broken last week against the Ravens. Not much of a surprise there. We just talked about the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. He's facing, again, another strong pass blocking unit, and then Patrick Mahomes. So expecting more regression there from Nick Bonito. Jonathan Cooper, solid. I got him as like edge 27 though this week. And Zach Allen, he's just been so good. It's hard to bench him at this point in DT required leagues. So he remains in that starting range for me. Yeah, and then Brandon Jones, I got a safety 15. Kansas City's top 10 in safeties allowed to the tackle position, or safety tackles allowed to the safety position. And then we'll see what happens with PJ Locke if he's back this week. Otherwise, Devin Key could be a nice streamer again.
Yeah, I think that Zach Allen and Brandon Jones are a couple of guys who are probably relatively affordable in drafts over the summer. And I think they've really evolved into guys that you can set and forget now. And against the Chiefs, they both have good matchups.
I feel like Brandon Jones might have been on our bounce back list as well.
That sounds right.
Yeah, it does sound about right. Yeah, I'll try to remember only the good ones.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had Von Bell a minute ago. Like, he was on the bounce back list. Well, I'll let that slide.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. We won't talk about Von Bell. Yeah. So then on the Kansas City side of things, I mean, Nick Bolton, kind of a shit matchup here again, which we've talked about. We talked about it last week that he's got tougher matchups, at least for tackles allowed, like to the linebacker position, really up until week 17 against the Steelers, but they're all below average matchups for him going forward. So he's still just above average in tackle rate on the year, 13.6%, but the Broncos given up 29th most tackles per game to linebackers. I got him as like LB 27 this week. There are a decent amount of full-time linebackers that, have at least better matchups, but I still like Nick Bolton. It's just, he hasn't had the matchups here. So slightly concerning, at least for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's my feeling, and you could fact check me on this. My feeling is that they've played a lot of base personnel. I wouldn't be surprised if they played top 3 most base personnel of any team in the NFL. And so I can't help but wonder if they're spreading some of those tackles out a little bit through that unit. And if that's a factor. Yeah, it could be a little bit different this week, in that we've got more of a running quarterback. Interested to see who they use as a spy. But yeah, I'm not super excited about Chiefs linebackers this week either.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and you're right. They do play Leo Chanel out there quite a bit, right? Drew Tranquil, obviously, as well. So I'm just looking really quickly. I think so. Base personnel, they're above average. The Lions are the highest rate. Obviously, they continue to be the biggest mix of linebackers out there. Dallas pretty high as well. Carolina, but yeah, Kansas City, they're just above average in terms of base personnel. So. It's higher than usual than most teams, like Buffalo, for example. Buffalo plays like 3% of their snaps in base personnel. But yeah, Kansas City much higher than that for sure. And then Justin Reed, I got Justin Reed as a potential start, like top 12 safety starter this week. Denver top 5 in tackles allowed per game to the safety position, and Reed has been pretty solid as well, and he'll move down into the box quite a bit to help his potential there too. Let's go to Pittsburgh and Washington next, and we'll start with the Pittsburgh defensive line, just really quickly, more than anything, because we know who these guys are: TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith. It'll just be interesting to see if like Jaden Daniels can remain really elusive against these two guys, like two high-end pass rushers on both sides of him. Washington's offensive line has been really solid as well. That's helped him quite a bit. So still like TJ Watt. Obviously, like we're starting TJ Watt, we're starting Alex Highsmith. They've just been too good to kind of bench at this point. But it is typically a tougher matchup for pass rushers here.
My sense is that, you tell me again if I'm wrong, my sense is that Daniels both holds the ball and still evades sacks.
He does.
Playing Pittsburgh, Are you really going to be successful in doing that? I mean, they're going to play some press man. Certainly going to make them hold the ball. I mean, they've been a pretty good defense. So when you've got TJ Watt and then Cam Hayward in the middle chasing you, we'll be interested to see if he can keep it up against Pittsburgh. I wouldn't be too concerned about my pass rushers in this game. I mean, a little concerned, but I'm certainly not to the point where I'd be looking for inferior options to start over based on matchup.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm starting TJ Watt, starting Alex Highsmith, starting Cam Hayward, Jaden Daniels, 7th highest time to throw in the league at 3.07 seconds. So yeah, he's holding on to it. He's running around. He's just done a really nice job avoiding sacks. But this is a different group here for sure this week. Other than that, Patrick Queen, decent matchup. Washington giving up the 11th most tackles per game to linebackers. I got him as LB23. Deshaun Elliott's been really good at playing more in the box as well. Like Minka Fitzpatrick has basically been stuck super deep this season, and he's just not factored in at all. So it's been Deshaun Elliott that's been cleaning up a lot of the tackles here and finding ways to be productive for IDP. So I got him as safety 8 this week. Washington giving up the 11th most tackles to safeties as well.
He's fascinating in that we've been waiting for 10 years for the strong safety to be fantasy relevant.
Terrell Edmonds.
I was scratching my head for 10 years. Why isn't the strong safety in Pittsburgh ever relevant? And finally, we got a guy that can make some freaking tackles. So, I wrote about him a couple weeks ago. I was like, at this point, he's practically set it and forget it option.
Yeah, he really is. Minka Fitzpatrick was always the guy. Like even when he played deep, he was always the one that would rack up the tackles for whatever reason, like just the other guys in front of him being inefficient or just the way the offenses attack that defense. But yeah, it's finally coming to fruition here the way that it should in Pittsburgh. They were one of the outliers for a long time there as far as, deep tackles coming from the safeties. So,
well, one thing about Fitzpatrick, though, right? He had that one huge season where he had like 120 tackles, and he hadn't had anywhere close to that since. He's been more of a big play guy in other seasons. That one season was the one season he did not get named to the Pro Bowl. The one season that Pittsburgh's defense was really weak. And so he's just making a bunch of tackles 12 yards downfield the whole time. I think it's with Pittsburgh's defense playing more effectively this year, those tackle opportunities 12 yards down the field just aren't there.
Yeah, no, I think it makes perfect sense to kind of how to look at that defense right now and specifically Minka Fitzpatrick. But on the Washington side of things, I got Bobby Wagner as LB1 this week. He's just been so good. He just continues to be productive. Dan Quinn running a lot less man coverage this season in Washington. It's not a ton less, but he is playing more zone than I think I would have expected, or at least that he was in Dallas. So it's giving, decent tackle efficiency for guys like Bobby Wagner in a good matchup, but it isn't working for Frankie Louvu, who has been brutally inefficient as a tackler. 9.1% tackle rate is really awful. 4 sacks, few fumbles in there, which have really helped him. But for IDP at least, but this was kind of the concern for me, coming into the year with Frankie Louvu, is that he's so kind of boom bust, which we typically don't want from our linebackers, since we're already getting that with like 99% of our defensive linemen and to an extent our DBs as well, right? He's just not, I don't think, a very useful kind of week to week IDP. He also plays on the edge a lot, 5th most among linebackers. He blitzes a lot as well, he blitzes at the second most among linebackers, which all lends to that kind of boom bust production, right? Like he's a fine NFL linebacker, nothing wrong with him there, but I just don't want anything to do with him for IDP. So it's a great matchup for linebackers this week. The Steelers giving up the 2nd most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So it's possible he has a good game, like if you need him, but I just wouldn't expect it kind of going forward. I'm not expecting like a turnaround season for him or anything like that.
Agree with you there. I think he's been exactly what we expected, if I'm not mistaken. So that being said, Russell Wilson is a guy that'll hold the ball and take sacks. So there may be some appeal to that. So between the high tackle efficiency that Pittsburgh generates for linebackers and the potential for him to take sack, I don't hate the idea of starting him. I don't know if he's an LB2, but certainly as an LB3, I feel fine with that. So you mentioned the man rate. I think they just traded for Marshawn Lattimore, I think. And so I would expect their man rate to pick up a little bit. I think that you got to really give Dan Quinn credit. I mean, Dan Quinn was one of those Seattle cover 3 country zone guys 5-10 years ago. And he's been able to evolve his defense and evolve with his personnel. And he had nothing at cornerback this year. I mean, just, I mean, freaking Emmanuel Forbes is, a $157, and every concern that people had for him coming in came true,
Yeah.
coming in the league. And then they picked up, I think their big free agent signing at corner was Michael Davis from the Chargers, who has had his moments, I suppose, but still, I mean, really, that's your headline guy at corner. And so, it was a desperate need, and they filled it now. And so, you're getting Lattimore in there, and he's fresh out of New Orleans, not going to know the defense that well. Probably would be more comfortable in man coverages than zone coverages, and probably is a guy that Washington needs to rely on a little bit. So I'm curious to see if that doesn't take up a little bit this week.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how they move those guys around. Like I'd expect it to be Lattimore and St. Just on the outside, and then their rookie Mike Sanderstill, who they had moved to the outside and were forced to kind of play like Noah Igbenogany, who's a failed first round pick from the Dolphins, but they were forced to play him in the slot. So expecting Sanderstill to kind of move to the slot a little bit, that'll hopefully help his IDP potential on in the right matchups, but. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to get a little bit more man coverage out there with Marshawn Lattimore now that they have that capable outside corner too. So, yeah, will be a fun one. And then Jeremy Chin quickly, had a great week last week, 48% of his snaps in the box, 12 total tackles. He's just been really inconsistent. Like I think he's a fine as a low end safety too. I got him as a safety 21 this week, but just not getting too excited about him rest of the season because we've seen that usage kind of fluctuate as well. Like if it sticks, where he always plays close to half his snaps in the box, then sure, I trust him a little bit more, but that just hasn't happened this season. They've moved those guys around quite a bit. So we'll see if that, Lattimore coming in, maybe that allows it a change as well in how they run their coverages. But yeah, Chin, solid. Just we'll see if he can be a little bit more consistent.
Yeah, more of a matchup guy for me at this point.
Yep. Yeah. And probably another one that was on our
bounce
back list. Yeah.
But he has significantly bounced back from last year.
Has, so. Yeah. So hey, we're like 3 for 3 here. So
there you go.
All right, let's go to San Francisco at Tampa Bay next trip. Anybody that you want to start with here?
Well, you got Tyke Smith on the show sheet. He's been interesting, right? I mean, we always are the Tampa Bay safeties are always been interesting. It's another one like Pittsburgh in that the strong safety seems like it should be productive as a tackle standpoint, and it really has not been. And especially Antoine Winfield has always been the guy that's piled up some numbers. And this year, a little bit like Pittsburgh, is you got a little bit different guy that's getting the numbers. And so Tyke Smith has been interesting in that regard. That being said, the safeties have a great matchup against San Francisco. The 49ers are fueling tackles back there, and Tyke Smith being more of a slot defender. It's like I think that's one of the things that we in IDP world need to kind of reckon with a little bit over the offseason. What is a safety and what is a corner? Do we want to call everybody kind of sort of dogmatically call everybody that plays in the slot for the majority of their snaps a corner? I don't know. It's something that I ponder, I guess, when I'm have my spare time, which is few and far between. But that being said, I think it's certainly happy to plug Antoine Winfield in there. I couldn't bring myself to start Jordan Whitehead for much of anything. I got him in an 18 team. I started. I have to start 18 defenders in one league, and I still don't think I could start him.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I think Tyke Smith probably Antoine Winfield, sure, but Tyke Smith probably the most interesting name because we talked. I think I touched on him last week, right, and talked about how he had been, getting a little bit of that typical nickel corner usage where he was coming off the field when the offense wasn't in 11 personnel and things like that, and they were going against the Chiefs who weren't playing a lot of 11 personnel, but Smith kind of broke the mold in a way last week. Like he played 86% of the defensive snaps when Kansas City, again, they didn't play a lot in 11 personnel, but what they did, Tampa Bay, was they lined him up against Travis Kelce more often than not when Kelce would move to the slot. So that kept him out there, which to me is the kind of usage that can help Tyke Smith be a little bit more matchup proof kind of going forward. And specifically this week against San Francisco, who ranked just below Kansas City in 11 personnel rate at 44%. Like they're another team that, they pose a threat with a high end pass catching tight end in George Kittle that might require Smith's services to kind of help cover this week as well. Right. So
Mhm.
49ers, like they're not giving up a ton of tackles per game to corners at 20th, but I'd like the usage for Smith. And, if he stays on the field, I think he could be a viable like CB2 this season or this week as well.
Yeah, if it's got the quarter required and that designation, then for sure is pretty attractive.
Yeah. And then other than that, I mean, Tampa Bay's linebackers were interesting because, well, Levante David, he was a full-time player, but KJ Britt was not, right? He was coming off the field last week on obvious passing downs, which for a while they kind of held out on doing that with him. They kept him on the field on every down basically, but with Servasier Dennis, when he was in the lineup, they were letting Dennis play on the obvious passing downs. They finally went to a different option with other than KJ Britt in those situations last week with JJ Russell mixing in, ran fewer linebackers on third and fourth down in general against Kansas City, which makes sense, right? And I imagine they'll do that again here against San Francisco. So tempered expectations for sure for KJ Britt, more in that kind of LB5 range, just because he'll be coming off the field a lot more. I know he was productive last week, but just something to keep in mind with his usage. And then Tampa Bay's defensive line, specifically, I guess, Kalijah Cansey, who had the rare, combination of getting 2 sacks with a 0% pass rush win rate this past week. Both of his sacks came on either a cleanup sack or a pursuit pressure, right? Where, he does, at the very least, like he has potential as this like former first round pick, but outside of I think it was his first game of the year, it just really hasn't shown as far as the pass rush potential yet. He's been solid, and even in his rookie year, 68.3 pass rush grade, that's not bad for a rookie, but he's actually on pace to finish lower than that this season. So just really wanted to provide at least some context to Kalijah Cansey's his game last week and then his season as a whole. Not to say that he can't be great or anything like that, but just tempering expectations and not expecting 2 sack performances from him every single week.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing last week in the sense that you have both Vita Vea and Kalijah Cansey put up 2 sacks each against a pretty stout interior line for the Chiefs, but it's 100% good context to know that Kalijah Cansey's not actually beating Trey Smith or just lost the center's name, but yeah, those are good players. Yeah, Creed Humphrey. Yeah, so yeah, we're a ways off from wanting to plug him into our lineups on a reliable basis. And against San Francisco, I'm they're outside zone. I don't think they're pouring opportunities into the middle of that line either. So I'm not eager to get them started this week.
Yeah, yeah, and then I don't have a ton on San Francisco this week. They're pretty easy defense. They got 2 full-time linebackers. We like both of them, especially Fred Warner. It's a good matchup for cornerbacks this week. The Bucs giving up what are they giving up here? The 4th most tackles per game to the cornerback position. So like Diamador Lenore and Charvarius Ward, Malik Mustafa's been solid. But yeah, other than that, Nick Bosa is going to be going up against Luke Gadecki at right tackle. Gadecki's been solid, just not on Nick Bosa's level, right? And Baker Mayfield has shown a tendency to take sacks this season. He has the 9th worst pressure to sack conversion rate on the season. So like the opportunity for Nick Bosa, I got him as edge 1 this week.
Well, let's keep in mind that we still don't have Mike Evans back this week. Godwin's out for the season. So I think that the cornerbacks' opportunities to make tackles are probably not quite as high as they were for 49ers versus the Bucs as they might have been when those 2 guys were on the field. But it also increases, I think, the opportunity to make a sack for the D line. You're starting post regardless, but boy, those receivers just did not uncover that against the Chiefs at all. That was just rough to watch. They were just force feeding the tight end Cade Otton because he looked like the only viable NFL pass catcher they had on the field there. So Sterling Shepard made a couple of catches late, but that wasn't really until the Chiefs started playing prevent defense. That was a tough game to watch for Baker Mayfield, man.
Yeah, those receivers literally did nothing. So
what do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was I can't pronounce his name. There's a guy named Sam O that's emerging as an edge in San Francisco. I'm wondering. I'm curious to see if he can start to pick up some work because they've really not gotten much production opposite Nick Bosa, and that guy I think came in made the team as the D tackle, but they moved him out to the edge a little bit, and he's a guy that piques my interest just a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember his name exactly, but yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, because I mean Leonard Floyd, he hasn't been anything special, right? He's an older player, and we know what Leonard Floyd is at this point in his career. Like he'll get sacks, but he's not doing it by putting up amazing pass rush metrics or anything like that. So yeah, Sam Oku Yinanu.
Thank you for taking a stab at it.
I tried. I think Sam O is a way better name to use here. But yeah, he played 47% of snaps last time they were out there. So he's definitely working in a bit more. They don't really have anybody else that's working in there. Like Robert Beal, it played 8%. So it's basically a 3-man rotation on the edge there. So if you can, give Leonard Floyd a little bit more of a break, because Leonard Floyd again just hasn't been great, but maybe this guy, yeah, we'll see. We'll somebody to keep an eye on here. I like the shout out. All right, that is that game. Let's go to Minnesota at Jacksonville as the next team up here. And I'll start with Jonathan Greenard really quick, and actually Andrew Van Ginkel to an extent as well. Both of these guys, I think, are in a good spot to kind of continue their strong IDP seasons this week. Jonathan Greenard, we've talked about it. He's in the midst of a career year right now with an 84.2 pass rush grade. That's a top 10 mark at his position. 48 total pressures, currently leads the NFL. Andrew Van Ginkel, meanwhile, currently sits as edge 3 in IDP scoring. He's going up against, they're both going up against Jacksonville this week. Both players are going to work both sides of the offensive line. They don't stick to one side. And that's kind of where the Jacksonville weak points are along that offensive line. Both their starting offensive tackles, Walker Little and Anton Harrison, rank outside the top 50 at their position in pass blocking grade. So like the opportunity here for Greenard and Van Ginkel quite a bit.
Yeah, they traded away Cam Robinson a couple weeks ago, so they're basically starting to back up at one tackle position. So yeah, and Lawrence is just, man, that's been another team that's been tough to watch. There, it just doesn't seem to make sense. But that offense is just seems to continue to regress. And Christian Kirk is out for the year now, and I think Brian Thomas is back healthy again. So that's something, but still, it's just and Etienne is still out. So they're struggling to threaten defenses right now, and so you really the only thing limiting production there is can the Jaguars hold the ball long enough to provide opportunities.
Yeah, it's true. Brian Thomas, like you said, he was back last week, but didn't look 100% healthy. He was dealing with that chest injury, but we'll see. I think ETN might be back this week by the sounds of it, but who knows? Either way, he hasn't been amazing himself this season, so not a huge needle mover there. But the thing on the defense that could be a needle mover, at least for IDP, is that Blake Cashman could or should be back this week. I was kind of reading like the team apparently is frustrated that he's missed this much time with the turf toe. I mean, the guy's he's been injury prone like his whole career, really. So not sure why they'd be overly surprised, but it sounds like at the very least they're eager to get him back out there, which unfortunately doesn't bode well for our beloved Ivan Pace. He'll see kind of a big decrease in usage with Blake Cashman back. So Blake Cashman is definitely startable. Ivan Pace wouldn't be if they're both in the lineup. It's been a one linebacker system here for Brian Flores, and imagine that Pace's role decreases quite a bit to the point where we won't like it for IDP purposes.
I always wonder what to make of those comments where people talk about the coaches will talk about being frustrated with, and why is that leaking out? But that happened last year with the Titans too, right? It's like, but Vrabel is calling out Christian Fulton and David Long, I think it was, for not being able to stay on the field. And I always called that the Beanie Wells theory. I always thought Beanie Wells looked great in the first game of every season. He started to get nicked up and he could not play through pain, I guess. That's the only explanation I could ever come up with. So these guys like Cashman, I mean, I don't know. What is it? Is some people just not able to play through pain, or is it just slower to heal? I don't know, but I think it's worth watching, right? Is he going to come out and play a full-time load if he can't get back on the field? So I wouldn't be eager to start either guy this week.
Fair. Yeah, no, that's fair for sure. And yeah, it is a weird thing, right? Like, I think who was it? It was Dennis Allen this year too, like going after Kendre Miller, their running back, right? He was kind of making some comments too, but I mean now, Kendre Miller's on IR again, so I guess he was right about him, but then also Dennis Allen's fired, so it's just, it's a lose-lose.
You throw your employees under the bus, it's not going to go well for you usually.
Crazy. And then on the Jacksonville side, Josh Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker. I want to talk about them really quickly. I have Hines Allen as edge 9 this week. I got Trayvon Walker edge 21. Allen, to me, like still the superior player. All the pass rush grades for Allen versus Walker are much better. Walker's a perfectly good kind of volume play. Like he's played more pass rush snaps than any player at his position. He's played the second most snaps at his position behind only Max Crosby, who has like 5 games of 100% snap share this season. So obviously, but yeah, I mean, Trayvon Walker, fun player. I get it. Former number 1 overall pick, super athletic. There's going to be hype around him, but for me, I just careful about how much I kind of invest in this guy. Like even the fumble return last week, like that was fun and all. Probably should have even been a fumble. Like I think Saquon Barkley was touched before he went down. It should have just been down by contact or whatever. But then the Eagles also should have probably tackled him. They had him wrapped up, but that's a whole other thing. But yeah,
the Eagles should learn how to close out a game. That would help a lot.
Oh my God, yeah, that would make a big difference too. No kidding. Yeah, it was close. It was really looking shaky for them there for a bit, but yeah, I think Trayvon Walker a fine kind of edge to this week, especially. It's a decent matchup. Sam Darnold it has a tendency to take some sacks here this season so far. So, but yeah, how are you feeling about this Jacksonville linebacker rotation? I guess, Tripp, because this is really interesting. I mean, especially with Foye Oluokun now back in the lineup, he played at least one snap on every drive last week. There were other weeks where he sat out entire drives. Maybe he can get back to 100% snaps again. It just feels unlikely based on how Ryan Nielsen's utilizing this defense. His snap share being around 90%. It's still fine for IDP, but I don't know. What's your kind of read on it? Do you think this will go away at any point, or do you think this is just kind of going to be how they utilize these guys for the entire season?
Yeah, I think at this point you've got to expect that this is how they keep doing it. I mean, like
Yep.
you were saying, 90%, 100% isn't making a huge difference, but it's making the difference between the Oluokun being the LB1 3 years in a row and to being more of an LB2 type for,
Yeah.
not just an LB1, but the overall LB1 for 3 years in a
Mhm.
row. And so I don't, yeah, but that being said, I think it's a pretty good matchup this week. So you don't hesitate to fire Oluokun up there. The
Yep.
bigger issue, of course, is Devin Lloyd, who, everybody talks about Anthony Richardson losing his job, and Devin Lloyd is, it's been demoted too. Granted, that looks
Yep.
different in defense because you can still play part-time. Hard to play part-time quarterback.
Right.
The head coach, Doug Peterson, was quoted as saying that they need to get their best 11 out there, and a lot of times that includes Ventrell Miller, who's effectively a rookie. He missed all of last year with, I think, an Achilles injury, and so they're liking what they're seeing in Miller. He was a 4th-round pick, not thought to be a real 3-down guy, but seemingly a guy that they likes the looks of, and Devin Lloyd was a problem in coverage last year. I wrote about that some this year in the preseason, and it continues to be a challenge for him. And this is an issue coming out in the sense that people like to say, "Oh, well, he's a great pass rusher." I feel like anytime you hear that an off-ball linebacker is a great pass rusher's prospect, that is a backhanded compliment.
That's it.
You probably should consider that a red flag.
Yeah, it's been a weird kind of rotation, especially with Devin Lloyd. Like at least with him, it's fluctuated more so because of Ventrell Miller getting in there. And there's been weeks where they've rotated drives, alternated drives. There's been weeks where Lloyd has worked a little bit ahead. There's been weeks where Ventrell Miller's worked ahead. So it's hard to trust either one of those guys for IDP. But for me, yeah, Foye Oluokun is really the only one that I'm trusting this week. All right, let's go to New England and Chicago next, Tripp. Where would you like to go with these two teams?
Well, I think I saw that Kyle Duggar might be at risk of missing this week, so that's a mild concern there. But one thing I've been interested to watch is to see how Marte Mapu is used and play and deployed. When he was drafted, I thought that he was the heir apparent to Adrian Phillips, and so when he first started to get some run this year, it seemed like maybe that was right. But then Jabril Peppers got hurt, and now he's playing deep a little bit more. So it's just an interesting, really a wild card. It's like, how excited are you to play him? But on the D line side. Yeah, Keon White, I think I just saw he is now banged up too, and it was just disappointing because Caleb Williams is a guy that'll hold the ball and take a sack, and so
Yep.
to try to figure out where you're going to get some production is a challenge. And the freaking linebackers for the Patriots has just been so unreliable for so long. It's like I don't know how you get excited about anybody. I wish Juwan Bentley would come back off IR.
I know. Yeah, the ghost of Bill Belichick continues to haunt that our IDPs in New England. It's just, yeah, we thought Christian Ellis, was going to be the new full time guy there, or at least close to full time leading the group. But that was fun for a week, basically, until it wasn't. Right, he was again supplanted by Jelani Tavai last week. So Tavai not a full-time player either. It's really hard to trust these guys. Even Mapu, like you said, like I got him more as a safety 3 range this week just because he was playing more deep, but really would have liked to see him continue in the box and take advantage of some of these better matchups, but just hasn't been the case here recently. And hopefully Kyle Duggar's back. If Kyle Duggar's back, I would definitely feel a lot better about starting him than Marte Mapu, but
Mhm.
just something to keep an eye on here. There's not a ton with New England, yeah, and then Keon White. Hopefully he plays too, because he's more of an edge two for me this week. And then on the Chicago side, Jaquan Brisker, I think unlikely to play again this week. We haven't seen him since week 5. This will be his 4th missed game because of this concussion. So that I don't know. That feels really scary to me that he's missed this long with the one concussion, or I don't know what happened there, but yeah, really concerning for Jaquan Brisker. So Elijah Hicks, Kevin Byard are likely going to be the starting safeties this week. And it's not like an amazing matchup or anything, right? New England giving up the 30th most tackles to the safety position. So you're not in a hurry to get Elijah Hicks or even Jaquan Brisker into your lineup, but doesn't sound like Brisker's even going to play this week.
Yeah, I would say that Brisker did play. That I'd probably start him anyway. I do like Brisker. I think
So do
he's
I,
been a
yeah.
productive player. But it was interesting to see Byron kind of pick up some of that production last week and not Hicks. Yeah, it's certainly got to avoid both of those guys in this case. The Patriots, just another team that really struggles to hold the ball and matriculate the ball down the field. And so it's just hard to get excited about any tackler. Obviously, you have Bears linebackers, you got to play them. I mean, it's really hard to avoid that. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it's certainly nothing to get excited about.
Yeah, no, for sure. And New England, to their credit, like they're at least giving us some tackles per game to the linebacker position. They rank 6th overall, but they've given up the 2nd most tackles per game to linebackers over the last 3 games with Drake May at quarterback. So that's been nice to see as well. And yeah, TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, you definitely could start those 2 guys every week. They're 100% players. And we'll see too with Montez Sweat. He missed last week's game. It's a nice matchup for pass rushing. That the Patriots' offensive line has been not good. And Drake May, he'll take some sacks as well as a rookie. So could be a nice matchup for Montez Sweat if he can get out there. But I think he could be in danger of missing this game as well. All right, let's go. Actually, before we go into the later window games, I do want to give a shout out to LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/PFFfantasy. That's linkedin.com/PFFfantasy to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, off to the Tennessee Titans at the Los Angeles Chargers. And the main thing here, I think, is going to be the Titans linebackers, because Jerome Baker, obviously, they traded Ernest Jones away. They got Jerome Baker in return. It's been 2 games. We haven't seen a single defensive snap from Jerome Baker. Jack Gibbons has been in a full-time role since they traded Ernest Jones away. For me, I feel like I probably am going to trust Jack Gibbons, like at least in deeper leagues, like I alongside Kenneth Murray. there's a chance that Jerome Baker, gets out there and they work him in a little bit to, and eats into the snaps of Jack Gibbons, but doesn't seem like a huge concern at this point. They don't seem in any kind of hurry to get Jerome Baker out onto the field. I don't know what happened last week. I don't know if he was dealing with an injury, because I saw something where he was in the medical tent at one point, but didn't even play. So I'm not sure what's exactly going on there. But how are you feeling about this Tennessee linebacker core now with Jerome Baker in the mix?
Yeah, I saw a remark I think it was from the GM, saying they were happy with the production that they were seeing from Gibbons, and so it sounded to me like I don't really know why they made that trade. I think that that's just still an interesting situation all around. Ernest Jones is now on his third team in 3 months, and then you've got Jerome Baker, who can't get on the field for anybody. So yeah, I'd be comfortable starting Gibbons as an LB4 if that's where you're at. And then you got Kenneth Murray in a revenge game, coming.
That's true.
Against the Chargers here. We'll see what he can do. I gotta think that they're going to want to try to get him up the field a little bit and see if they can't get some pressure on Herbert with their lack of threats to the pass game.
Yep, for sure. And then the rest of the Titans, really, I mean, Jeffrey Simmons, I got him as like a DT2 or as DT2 this week, like him quite a bit. Harold Landry, not a terrible matchup for him. I got him as edge 18. He's been solid, playing a lot of snaps and been productive. And then the only other thing, Quandre Diggs suffered a season-ending Liz Frank injury. So he was replaced by Mike Brown. Doesn't sound very interesting at all. I know it's just another name for those deeper leagues. If you're looking for a potential full-time replacement from Quandre Diggs, Mike Brown is the guy. But yeah, Amani Hooker is probably the better play here. On the Chargers side of things, this is a nice matchup for the pass rushers here, specifically Khalil Mack. The Titans' offensive tackles are not good. It does seem like Will Levis is going to be back this week. So I think the pressure to sack conversion rate that I have on the screen there is for Mason Rudolph, but it does seem like Will Levis is going to play this week, which is better for the Chargers pass rushers, because Will Levis will definitely take some sacks. And yeah, just given how bad that offensive line has been, Khalil Mack definitely an option. Joey Bosa, he played last week. It was like 24% of snaps or something like that. I don't know how much he'll play this week. It just feels like if they push him too much, he'll crack and break and not make it through the entire game. So I just have a really hard time trusting Joey Bosa. I don't know. Where are you at with Bosa? Like, because this is like a prime matchup for pass rushers at this point. So if you're going to play him, this would be the week to do it. Just beware of the potential snap share.
Yeah, well, Levis has no pocket awareness. Rudolph was focused on limiting bad plays, and so that makes the matchup less interesting if he does stay in there. But yeah, with Levis in there, and you got upside with Bosa. He's capable of a 3-sack outburst. But I don't know if anybody can explain what's going on. I mean, he hasn't played a full complement of snaps since week 1, I don't think, and it just doesn't add up.
Yeah, no, just can't stay healthy, right? It's just really frustrating, because we know that he's talented. It's just we'd love to see him make it through a full season, but doesn't seem likely. So the Chargers linebackers, they're interesting too. Like, I like Diane Henley quite a bit this week. I got him as LB14. He's been a full-time player now in back-to-back weeks. I know the snap share doesn't reflect that last week, but that's just because he didn't play in garbage time, essentially, right? They took him out of the game. He was 100% snaps up until that point. So Junior Colson also landed on injured reserve, so he's out of the mix here. So it'll be, Henley leading the way again as the full-time guy, and Denzel Perriman and Troy Dye just making cameos here and there, which aren't going to, really do anything. So, just wanted to shout out Diane Henley as definitely a startable linebacker this week.
And maybe Denzel Perriman too. He's not really getting to work, but when he's in there, he's historically been really efficient at making tackles somehow. It's like it's almost magic. And boy, I just like him as a player. He's just fun.
And actually, he might have been on our bounce back list as well. It hasn't worked out, but every once in a while we get one wrong.
That's right.
Maybe he can make us look better here in the second half.
Well,
of the
hey,
season.
That's right. You got half the season to do it. Colson's on IR. Let's see it happen.
Yeah, there you go. Let's look at the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys now. Tripp, anywhere that you'd like to start with these two teams?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll start with the Cowboys. I'm a Cowboys fan, so
go for it.
Oh boy, it's frustrating to be a Cowboys fan. It's like there's no team that has disguised coverages at a lower rate than the Cowboys. I wrote about that in the preseason. I grinned and cringed and hoped it wouldn't be as bad as it has been, but here it is. I think there's a chance that Micah Parsons is back this week. Have you heard
Yep.
that?
Yep.
Okay,
Sounds
good.
like he'll be back.
Yeah, that's a freaking relief. I mean, that transforms the whole defense if he can do something. So I mean, then again, you've got Cooper Rush playing on, I guess, on the offensive side of the football potentially. So that's just a mess right now. But one thing I do find interesting is that Philadelphia has given up a ton of points to opposing defensive tackles, and one of my misses to date has been Oso Odigizua as a defensive tackle. He was really by metrics solid last year. Great burst, routinely one gapping, routinely getting up the field. The Zimmer defense is a little bit different. That his role has not been quite the same, and he's really suffered. He can't do gap for saves life. But I'm really hoping that they might turn him loose a little bit and try to do something a little bit different with Micah Parsons back on the field and try to generate some pressure. No team by football guys scoring. Nobody's given up more points to opposing defensive tackles than the Eagles. The only team that is the Patriots. And I was too slow to mention Javon Dexter or the Bears as a must start if you're a defensive tackle connoisseur. But I would love to see some pressure from the Cowboys onto the Eagles, and it would be the first time in a while that we could feel good about the Cowboys pass rush.
Yeah, I mean, Micah Parsons being back makes a huge difference, right? We talked about last week, we picked on Kirkland Brand, Lane Johnson, Fred Johnson, who's been playing left tackle for the Eagles, 41.2 pass blocking grade last week. Yeah, we picked on him for good reason because Josh Hines Allen had 2 sacks against him. In that game, wouldn't be surprised if Dallas lined up Micah Parsons there quite a bit, at least, to help him get a softer matchup, to get his feet wet and back in the stat sheet and make a difference there. Like, that's a huge mismatch that they could take advantage of. I'd imagine that they'd go to do that. So I got Parsons, it sounds like he's back and going to be full go. So top 5 edge rusher this week for me, just because of that game plan specifically that I have in mind. But we'll see if they actually follow through with it, Tripp, because like you said, they've been a disappointing defense through this point of the season. And then, the other pieces too, the linebackers really, I think we're fine with them. I mean, Eric Kendricks, I got his LB6 this week. DeMarvion Overshone in that LB2 range as well. Eagles giving up the 7th most tackles to the linebacker position. So like the potential matchup here for the Dallas linebackers. Anything else for Dallas for you, or should we talk about the Eagles?
Well, I kind of like the matchup for the safeties a little bit, but boy, Donovan Wilson's been another Cowboy that's just been a disappointment. It just, it's just the transition of the defense. I think sometimes we underestimate how significant that is. And Donovan Wilson is a guy that seemed to find a home in that Dan Quinn defense, but never really was a full-time player. Has been strained by being a full-time player this year. And not really worth starting, which is disappointing to me.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's had like really nice matchups before and just not able to kind of take advantage of them. So it's harder and harder to trust Donovan Wilson, just given his lack of efficiency this season. On the Eagle side of things, anything for you that you want to touch on? I got a couple at least.
Yeah, the big thing here is that with Cooper Rush potentially playing quarterback, I mean, you've got, and Josh Sweat had that 2-sack game. He's been a disappointment from IDP because he's just not tackling anybody. All of us, I mean, it's just, I don't know how that's even possible. He so few tackles and Vic Fangio's defense, but it's how he does. I mean, it's not like he's just storming up the field like in a typical all one gap in defense, but somehow he's not tackling anybody. Nevertheless, he does have 5 sacks through 8 games, which is, you can't complain about that rate. And the Cowboys have not been exactly stout at left tackle, so you got to like Sweat to get to have some opportunities. And Nolan Smith, the young player, is picking up his work share just a little bit. And as Brandon Graham has told us he's going to retire, so they've got to get Nolan Smith ready to go. So I would think that his role would gradually tick up over the course of the season.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like Josh Sweat a fair bit this week, at least, for big play scoring, like you said, going up against Cooper Rush and Tyler Guyton. Tyler Guyton's given up 4 sacks on the season, ranks 56th among 74 offensive tackles in pass blocking grade. And I also really like Jalen Carter as well. He really stands out to me because I think he's got a chance to feast this week again against a backup quarterback, coming off a career high 96% snap share in week 9 and delivering the third best pass rush grade for the position this season at an 84.7 through the first half of the year. So he's got just the 3 sacks on the year, but again, a nice positive matchup. Zach Martin, who is in the midst of his worst season of his career, essentially, as far as the PFF grades go. And then center Cooper Beebe as well ranks 27th among 34 qualifying players at his position in pass blocking grades. So if Jalen Carter continues kind of his dominance as a pass rusher, as well as that high end snap share against Cooper Rush, like I really like Jalen Carter as a potential option this week as well. And then Cooper DeJean, just referencing him, Dallas top 10 in 11 personnel rate, their offense. He's actually stayed on more outside of those situations, which is great for him. So he's another one that's I think startable, depending on how competent we think Dallas's offense is going to be with Cooper Rush.
Yeah, how many pass opportunities are there is the question, right? I mean, if you got Doc out there, they're going to throw the ball over the field, and they're going to push up quarterbacks to push up tackle opportunities to quarterbacks. But without that, I wouldn't be eager to start him. I'd be more interested in linebackers. One thing I think has been interesting is Reed Blankenship. I'm interested in your thoughts on this. It seems like as Dean has played better, and I would expect this to continue, that the opportunities would decline for the safeties, especially with Blankenship. If Dean continues to play well, they don't need to cheat the safeties up. Can keep them back, and that could be. It could be huge for that defense in terms of really playing those light boxes that Fangio is known for, and it could be quite damaging to the safety values for IDP.
No, it's a really good point, right? Like, and they're a team that, like you said, they run 2 full-time linebackers. So if both of those guys are playing well and doing their job, like it doesn't leave a lot for the secondary there. So, it would definitely be something to kind of keep an eye on. I know, Dean he's been solid at least for IDP, but wasn't like, I think he only had like 1 or 2 tackles last week, but he made up for it with the interception. So, hopefully he can. I mean, if he's going to be efficient, at least that'll help clean things up and potentially take away from Reed Blankenship. But I like the thought there for sure. It's definitely possible, as both of those guys have played well, Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean. Okay, next game is the New York Jets at the Arizona Cardinals. And for this game, I think we'll start with the Jets defensive line. Just quickly, I mean, Quinnen Williams, 3 sacks over his last 2 games. Tougher matchup this week because the Arizona interior offensive line, they have the 6th best pass blocking grade on the year. They've been really solid. Kyler Murray, obviously, we know, very elusive as well, pretty good at avoiding sacks. So even Will McDonald and Hassan Reddick, like Paris Johnson and Kelvin Beachum, have been really solid at their tackle spots for Arizona. So it's not a great matchup for the pass rush, but like these guys are pretty good. So I still find myself wanting to start, obviously, Quinnen Williams, like DT9 for me. Like you could potentially have options better than him. If I have a Cam Hayward, for example, like I've been playing Cam Hayward over him a lot of weeks now. But Will McDonald is somebody that I think could struggle a little bit more. But Hassan Reddick is interesting, at least coming off his 2nd game of the year, increased his playing time, landed a half sack, got in the score sheet here for the first time as well. So I think he'll continue to kind of play a larger role as this season goes on. And I think he could provide some value for those guys, like for IDP managers in need of like edge depth and somebody that could, hit his stride just at the right time in the season near the fantasy playoffs. I think Hassan Reddick's a really interesting name to kind of go after if he's still available on your waiver wire.
I mean, of course, too, Robert Saleh got fired. And so you've got an interim coach in there that's going to do whatever the GM says. Yep. And the GM says, you can't make me look bad by keeping Hassan Reddick on the sideline.
Right.
So there's going to be some more opportunities out there for him.
There's definitely going to be opportunities. Yeah. So, and then the other thing here is the linebackers for the Jets. Jamie and Sherwood, I got him as LB16, and that really has everything to do with, I think, the availability, or I guess lack thereof, for CJ Mosley, who's been dealing with injuries, lower snap shares, even when he is in the lineup. Like, It's possible that CJ Mosley could return this week, but I think given what we've seen in recent weeks, and specifically last time that Mosley was coming in off an injury, I think it's fair to still expect Sherwood to remain as a full-time player, and maybe Mosley only sees work in those base packages again, at least until they feel like he's fully comfortable, if they ever plan on playing him full-time again. But they've already shown us that they're going to ease him in coming off injury. So feeling pretty comfortable about Jamien Sherwood in a good matchup here. Going against Arizona Cardinals, who rank 5th in tackles allowed to the opposing linebackers and 1st in tackle efficiency to linebackers as well. So a nice matchup for guys like Jamien Sherwood and Quincy Williams this week.
I'm with you. I basically wrote about Mosley last week and wrote him off.
Yeah.
I just think that it's time to, for IDP managers, I think you have to not expect him to come back. And if he's a guy that you rely on, I think you've got to find other solutions. And it's probably too late to pick up Sherwood off the wire. He's probably gone a couple weeks ago.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It makes sense. It makes sense that they would look to be kind of moving off CJ Mosley at this point. On Arizona's side of things, we talked about Budda Baker. He's still a top option. I know it's not the best matchup here for safeties, but there's certain guys that we're treating as matchup proof. I'm leaving Budda Baker in my lineup every single week. Jalen Thompson kind of in the low end safety 2 range. He's just playing a ton in the box, which really helps his potential. But yeah, he's not like necessarily the must start. He just hasn't been as effective. The linebackers, Kaiser White, I have as LB in the LB1 range, but Mac Wilson is interesting to me. Like I got him a lot lower this week. I got him as LB45, played 69% of snaps last week. He's actually been an inefficient tackler on the year, 10.2%. He started the year really strong and people were excited about him and stuff. But, I think logical regression was bound to hit with him here because, we talked about his usage being kind of matchup dependent before in this defense, which is why, we shouldn't have latched on to like an 80% snap share, which he was playing at one point. But also with Mac Wilson, kind of like Frankie Louvu, he spent more snaps on the edge and more snaps blitzing than any other off-ball linebacker in the league, which is just a killer for tackle efficiency, right? And he'll have his big games, but consistency-wise, it's not great on top of the fluctuating snap share. So just not expecting much week to week from Mac Wilson and find a move on from him if you have other options.
Well, this is we actually talked about Mac Wilson's bounce back, and of course, the benefit of that, he's bouncing back from 0, so we couldn't be wrong. But nevertheless, this is kind of what we described: is that we were wondering what his role would be, and was an inside-outside type of a role, because how he seemed to come back to relevance was by playing on the edge in New England when they had just myriad injuries at that position, and got himself a job in Arizona. But yeah, this is a guy with playing 2/3 of the snaps is going to be matchup dependent. Aaron Rodgers is not a guy that's taking sacks. As you show here, this line, they're not giving up a ton of tackle opportunities to linebackers. So interesting enough, Kaiser White's not making a ton of tackles either. He's one of the lower tackle efficiency linebackers in the entire league. And that's kind of an interesting wrinkle. And he got the Cardinals playing a fair amount of 3 safeties, if I'm not mistaken. And often, yeah, I guess that's where to look then, is the safeties. And of course, now with Devonta Adams in tow, you expect that Devonta Adams and Garrett Wilson are going to stress the cornerbacks they have out there. I think Starling Thomas is still the starting cornerback at one spot. It's like, who? Well, that's probably a good target then to get him out there, because he's going to see a healthy amount of receivers that can beat him off the ball.
Yeah, no, for sure. Starling Thomas and I think the rookie Max Melton too. So it's not a great secondary on the outside there for Arizona, but yeah, that's kind of it for the IDPs for me. Let's go to Sunday night football trip. The Detroit Lions against the Houston Texans. Where would you like to start with these two teams?
Well, the big news there, of course, is they picked up Zadarius Smith, and so the question you have to ask yourself is how much does he play in his first game out there? And Houston, his hairline has been a shadow of what it was last year, and CJ Stroud has been has been taking some snaps, has taken some sacks, and so that's something to watch. I think that Stroud and the Texans have probably looked worse over the last 2 or 3 weeks than they probably are, but nevertheless, the Lions defense has looked effective, and so I think if you need a guy, especially if you've got like guys like Max Crosby on bye this week, then I think that Zadarius Smith is maybe a guy you want to roll the dice and throw out there. So that's I guess probably the top thing that I'm looking at. It's interesting to see that the Texans are giving up a ton of points to safeties, and Brian Branch. I mean, of course, Brian Branch is the beauty of Brian Branch is that in some formats he has CB designation and he's the top safety overall. So, boy, is that a windfall there for those folks. And Kirby Joseph has somehow, despite playing a fair amount of deep safety, been highly productive as an IDP as well. Those two guys are. You got to be excited about firing them up. And I haven't seen is Nico Collins looking to come back this week, or is he on IR one more week?
I think it was looking possible at the very least. But I actually, when I checked it today, I think he might be out. So it could be one more week. Yeah, for Nico Collins. I can't remember for sure. I don't usually look until Thursday, but I think it is. I think it is one more week for him. But yeah, I'm with you. Zadarius Smith, like I think he's going to play. It'll be his first game, and I think they're going to play him. Like they need this guy, right? And you know, you don't necessarily have to learn the playbook as much as a pass rusher as you necessarily do with other positions. So if they get him out there in situations, I think he could be a fine play. But the other bit, like you said, I mean, Brian Branch, safety one for me. Kirby Joseph's been solid. We could start him continuously as well in a great matchup here. But Jack Campbell, the linebacker for the Detroit Lions, has now played over 90% of the defensive snaps for the first time in his NFL career. It's a positive sign. I do think, there's potential that it might not go away. Like I feel optimistic about it because Detroit's used guys like Jalen Reeves-Maybin and Trevor Nowaski in that kind of Malcolm Rodriguez role, but Rodriguez has been out the past 2 weeks, which could throw a wrench into things if he's back, right? And knock that snap share down, only because Dan Campbell seems to want to rotate these guys quite a bit. Now, they spent a first round pick on Jack Campbell. I would like to think that, they're going to utilize him more than they have. Over 90% of snaps is seems like as good as what we can hope for, as long as Alex Anzalone's in the lineup as well. But there is still a part of me, I guess, that is hesitant about fully embracing Jack Campbell, but I'm feeling more optimistic than I have, at least in the past. So we'll see how that comes around to bite me in the ass.
Well, one thing is they're going to see a lot of Joe Mixon, and you would think that Jack Campbell is the guy they want out there over Malcolm Rodriguez, even if Rodriguez is healthy, to face Mixon. And I think I saw some positive comments about Campbell from the coaching staff recently. Granted, you don't take the positive comments with as big of a wow as you do the negative comments, but nevertheless, I mean, you gotta, like you said, the guy's a first round pick. You got to think that they're wanting him to grow into that role, and this seems like a good opportunity to take more of a job and try to bottle up Mixon if they can.
Yeah, I mean it makes perfect sense, right? But it's just not the way they've done it. So there's just part of me that's worried, but yeah, I'm hopeful at least for Jack Campbell. On the Houston side of things, their edge rushers, Will Anderson, we saw got banged up last week in that Thursday night game, got rolled over on his ankle there. I don't know if he's gonna play this week. He's at least questionable right now. Danico Autry could be an option if Will Anderson is out, but it is a more difficult matchup this week, right? Like Danielle Hunter is going to have to face off against Penei Sewell at right tackle. Will Anderson, that Lions offensive line has been solid. So, I think both of those guys, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, are startable. It's just one of those ones where if they have a down week, I don't think we should be surprised or panicked or anything like that. So I have Hunter as like edge 13, Will Anderson as edge 16 if they're both able to go, which Hunter at least does seem like he will be.
Oh, you got to start those guys if you have them. And it's the frustrating piece of it's just this is a defense. It's a one gapping defense. They don't make a lot of tackles, but man, there's no way you have Danielle Hunter on your roster and can afford to bench him. Will
Yeah.
Anderson, if he's banged up and you're looking at a limited snap share, maybe you make the case, but boy, it's just
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, I guess you got to look at your roster and think, what are your odds of winning? Do you need a safe play? Okay, fine. But if you want upside, then you got to get Anderson out there too.
Yep. Yeah, I'm with you. Like I'm just thinking I got like a lineup. It's Nick Bosa, Alex Highsmith, and Danielle Hunter. And matchups like this is where I might lean Highsmith, but it's still really close for me. I will have to see how I go. I'm sure I'll flip flop on it throughout the week here into Sunday. So, um,
Well,
and then
I need to play in some of these 8-man leagues, man.
oh no, that one's a 14 team.
I
It's a
understand.
14 team. Yeah, I know. It's hard to my lineup decisions can often be the worst part. But anyways, the Houston linebackers are also interesting. It seemed like Azeez Al-Shaair was back at practice today. So trending in the right direction to playing. It's not a guarantee that he's back, but he is at least back at practice. And Henry To'o obviously has been playing as well. So really, I think it's those two guys kind of going forward here if they're both healthy again. Neville Hewitt kind of working as the LB3, which means Devin White, rest in peace, I guess. I don't think that he's going to work his way back onto the field here for much else. I think he was really just a warm body that needed to fill in because they had those injuries at the position. He's not a starting caliber player at this point in his career.
It's fascinating how these guys pile up, right? You got Jalen Smith and
Oh yeah.
Micah. What's the guy's name? Miles Jack and Blake Martinez, and these guys they're high volume tacklers one day, and the next day they're just freaking gone.
Yeah,
and it's just I think that sometimes it's important to watch an IDP. Is a player actually good? So it's easy to ride that in the short term and say, oh well, it doesn't matter. He's getting a lot of snaps. Okay. It matters. Eventually, It comes back to bite you.
Yep. No, for sure. And then for Christian Harris too, I saw something that he's not expected back until after the team's week 14 bye, so potentially week 15. So we don't really got to worry about him factoring in here in the next few weeks. It doesn't seem like, but that'll be something to deal with down the road here. But that's future us's problem.
Yeah, I wouldn't mess with it though, right? I mean, at this point, if you
I
can't
know.
rely on it, you can't rely on a snap share coming out of that week
No.
15. It's like if you need a roster spot, you could let him ride.
Yeah.
Unless you can carry him on IR. But yeah.
Yep. Possible. All right. Last game of the week, Monday Night Football, Miami Dolphins at the Los Angeles Rams. Miami linebackers, an interesting situation because Anthony Walker replaced David Long, who was benched last week, and Walker played 100% of the defensive snaps, and he led the team in total tackles. He was solid. The only reason, like I've ranked Walker a little bit lower, just in a little bit of hesitation because we don't know for sure if the benching of David Long was a 1 week occurrence or if Walker and Long might split time if they're willing to give Long another shot here. So I do find him a little bit more difficult to trust this week. I'm fine adding him and kind of holding him just because it isn't uncommon for NFL teams to bench a player 1 week and then give them another shot the following week, right? So for now, I'm just kind of holding on Anthony Walker and potentially David Long as well to see what happens here. But I think this week will definitely give us a better idea. But how about you? Do you have a better read on this situation?
It's a little bit like that Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson situation, right?
Right.
It could go that same way. We just don't know. I predicted that Anthony Walker would overtake David Long in July. It's only taken me 4 months to be right. I hope I'm right.
Hey.
But that being said, I wouldn't try to plug into my lineup this week. I think I would just stick with Jordan Brooks, be done with it.
Yeah, Jordan Brooks is definitely the one here. I mean, if you want to stream a safety as well, Javon Holland, I don't know if we want to wait until Monday Night Football if we don't get any clarity if he's going to play this week. But Jordan Poyer, potentially Marcus May, it's a decent matchup here against the Rams, who rank 4th in tackles allowed to the safety position, but not in love with the pass rushers other than maybe Zach Sealer if he's able to go. I know he's missed the last couple games with that orbital bone injury or whatever it was, but it's a decent matchup for him as the Rams offensive line has been pretty poor.
That's an interesting thing. Like, how are you questionable with an orbital bone break? You're either ready to go or you're not, right? I'm not
it's
sure.
weird, right? Because because Kyle Van Noy didn't miss any games, and it had the same injury, I think, after week 1, right? He suffered the orbital bone injury against the Chiefs, and he was back out there the next week. Like, it was a 10-day rest period, but for Sealer, it's been 2 weeks now. So, yeah, hopefully he's back out there and we see him practicing, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
All right, maybe one of the more interesting teams here of the week is the Los Angeles Rams, starting with their linebackers slash safeties, I guess, because Jalen McCullough kind of emerged with maybe one of the more interesting roles for a safety in all of IDP last week, because the Rams essentially used him as the team's LB2 next to Christian Roseboom. He played 70% of the team's defensive snaps, and then 70% of those snaps, so 39 of them, came lined up as an off-ball linebacker. So it's just 1 week, and that usage was very good, and it was so good actually that it was 15 percentage points higher than the next closest safety who played in the box, who played at least 10 defensive snaps in a game. If the Rams continue to choose to go with this usage, then McCullough, I think, could be one of the top kind of cheat codes in IDP, which, for this week too, like, it happens to be a prime matchup against the Miami Dolphins, who allow the second most tackles per game to opposing safeties and the fourth most tackles per game to opposing linebackers, of which McCullough might be, just designated as a defensive back on IDP platforms. He's a cornerback on some, he's a safety on others. So if we're getting a potential linebacker there, even if it's a 70% snap share, like, I got him as safety 13 this week. I'm banking on it to continue, but it's definitely risky. I understand that not everybody is going to want to risk it after just 1 week of that usage. So how are you feeling? Because the Rams, obviously, their linebacker core is a mess. So I'm not surprised to see them experimenting here.
Yeah, what is it? A couple of years ago that Les Steed, and the meme was "F them picks."
Yep.
Well, apparently it's now "F them IDP managers,"
Yeah.
because Omar Speights was talked up throughout the course of the week.
God, yeah.
He was going to get a bigger role, and he no. It's just that is another. And it's interesting too to think back a couple of weeks ago about the comments that McVay made about the decision to trade away Ernest Jones. It sounded like he had some regret in the comments that he made about that, and so maybe it has something to do with the inability of either Spates or Hummel to develop into a player they wanted to be on the field. So that being said, I mean, the Dolphins are, like you mentioned, the propensity for them to pile up tackles or to fuel tackles to the middle of the field with the safeties and linebackers, and they're going to be running the ball a good bit. They have not. I mean, Jalen Waddle has hardly been a factor this year. There was some talk that Jonnu Smith would be a credible threat as a pass catcher. That really hasn't developed. I'm interested to see how this develops. And do you want to get a guy? And I don't know a lot about this Jalen McCullough guy, but if he is in fact a native defensive back and trying to play linebacker, is that really a guy you want against the, what you expect to be a heavy dose of 12 personnel and whatnot? That's I certainly respect the nerve to go ahead and stick Jalen McCullough up there high in the rankings. Boy, it's certainly an interesting matchup. I'm interested to watch this game on Monday night.
Yeah, it'll be a good one for sure. And I've definitely picked him up in a lot of places. There's a few spots where I'm aiming for upside, and I'm going to plug him in and hope for the best. And if it doesn't work out, that definitely comes with the risk of it. But it's really, to me, it's just a lack of other options that they have to play that role. Like even Cam Curl, who we thought could play more in the box as their second linebacker. Like, I don't know what happened with him last week. I know he was banged up coming into the week, but he didn't play in the fourth quarter or overtime of that game. I don't know if he was benched for Cameron Kinchins, but I'm not trusting him this week. I don't know that the team necessarily trusts him either. So really, like, for me, Jalen McCullough, Quentin Lake, I think are good options. I'm not trusting Cam Curl this week. Christian Roseboom is a fine option. He's playing close to full time. And Jared Verse obviously, gets the better matchup for the pass rushers here going against Austin Jackson. Talked about it last week, how good Jared Verse has been. He's edge 10 for me this week, potential defensive rookie of the year at this point. He's just been so good. I think, we could continue to start him, but yeah, it's a Interesting, a very interesting defense for the Rams. I like you said, I'm very excited to see this one on Monday Night Football. But anything else from this game for you?
Well, it's like I thought it was interesting that Roseboom was not only full time but productive as a tackler, right? So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it's something that I think that when Reader first went on IR, I think there were some real questions as to how that would pan out. But
Mhm.
Roseboom looked like a solid starter last week, and yeah, I think you can reliably plug him in your lineup. So if that's for shallower leagues, if anybody out there is playing in leagues where you only need two linebackers, he's a guy that might be. I mean, well, might have been picked up last night if your waivers ran last night, but probably still out. It might still be
Mhm.
out there. It's worth a pickup. And Verse has just been a monster. I mean, he's not only he has not been a super productive pass rusher in terms of actually collecting the sacks, but
Mhm.
he's been a decent job at creating pressure, and he's been good on tackle volume as the Rams linebackers were last year's, the outside linebackers that is, were as well last year. So this is with the outside zone the Dolphins are playing. I think you got to be very happy to play Verse in your lineup.
Yeah, no, he's been very, very good. And yeah, Christian Roseboom, we're not excited about him necessarily for dynasty purposes, but like you said, we can't stick our noses up at these guys in redraft, and potentially great matchup here as well. So don't mind Christian Roseboom being a starter for me this week if I needed him to. So um, that's going to do it for us this week. Just want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching, liking, subscribing, all this stuff that you continue to do. I very much appreciate it. As always, I hope that helps you win your matchup this week. And if you do still have questions, always feel free to ask them in the comment section or reach out via Twitter. I always do my best to try to get to them all. But a huge thank you to the brilliant Dynasty Tripp for helping me break down this week's slate of games. I know we all came away a bit more knowledgeable thanks to Tripp. Now, let's take that knowledge and get a win here in week 10. Tripp, can't thank you enough for coming on tonight and giving up your time and insight to help me and the good folks tuning in get ready for this week. I really do appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to do it, man. I really do enjoy coming on and talking some football with you. And even though I'm losing my voice a little bit tonight, I'm not sure what's going on. But always learn a ton coming on a podcast with you. And like you said, I hope that folks that are tuning in find it useful. Folks are welcome to reach out to me at Dynasty Trip on the old Bird app and see what's up, ask questions. I'm always happy to help folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Always feel free to reach out to Tripp. Does great work. And please, Tripp, let everybody know what you got going over at footballguys.com as well.
Yeah, man. So my weekly column is called "Reading the Defense," and I'm typically looking at how schemes and player usage are affecting fantasy output. I'm not the expert on the prospect value. I like to watch NFL teams over the offseason and not college football over the offseason. So I really enjoy that study of it. And this week, I think I'm going to be looking at some sells. So we've got trade deadlines here, and lots of folks I'm sure are publishing buys. I'll publish some sells. Here's some guys to get off your roster. So appreciate anyone who checks it out. Footballguys.com.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, Tripp does great work. Make sure to check that out. And then as for me, IDP Fantasy Report, that's out now, linked in the episode description. That'll have waiver wire targets, snap shares, utilization nuggets, lots of thoughts on every team and IDPs in there. IDP rankings article will be linked in the episode description as well as the rankings page. Again, feel free to ask start sit questions if you like in the comment section. I'll try to get back to those as soon as I can. Otherwise, I will be back on Monday morning with a week 10 IDP recap. So be sure to check that out. But that's it for now. So good luck this week. And until next time, peace out.